Hello and welcome to this episode of Superhero Ethics. Today, myself and Paul Christopher Hoppy, aka Zen Madman, are going to be discussing quitting. What happens when someone decides I don't want to do anything anymore? Yeah. What happens when someone decides they just don't want to do something anymore? Like that happens in a job, we generally celebrate it. Like go you. That happens in a relationship. Well, yeah, as long as you're not being a dick about it, cool. Do your thing. You quit a bad habit. That's great. You quit a habit. Sometimes that's great. Sometimes people look at you askance. A superhero decides they want to quit. They want to just go have a normal life. Well, great power comes great responsibility. We all know that. We're talking about quitting and how it is perceived in media and in our own heads, and how a lot of times quitting, whether it is at the smallest macro level or a large, national level or, individual, but fundamentally changing a part of your life level, can sometimes be the right thing to do. Looking at that in poker, looking at that in superhero media, looking at that in life. Paul, this was a topic you came up with. Talk to me about why this was important to you.
Yeah. So the first time I really gave a lot of thought to this, I mean, not about people quitting smoking and stuff like that, but
Yep.
in a broader sense, and actually, this was a specific sense. Was there's a poker mindset coach, I guess, slash writer, Tommy Angelo, who's kind of the OG poker mindset coach, and one of
Mm-hmm.
the things he talked about was quitting and like effective quitting. And the thing about poker is, just to use the specific example, obviously, playing a hand, knowing when to continue and when to fold a hand and essentially quit playing that exact hand is very important. But there's
Mm-hmm.
also, you decide to go play or play at home or whatever it is. You start playing, and at some point, you're going to stop playing,
Right.
right? Um, for some people, that's like they play about an hour and then they quit. And sometimes we might have a sense of, well, this is how long I intend to play today. Maybe you go to the casino, you're going with people, and then you're just going to quit when other people want to go home.
Well, wait a minute. If I just decide I'm done with something because I've made a plan for it, that's not quitting, is it? Why are we calling that quitting?
Yeah, yeah, because it is right. It's always sticking to your plan is a decision,
Mm-hmm.
right? It might be a decision that you consider you've made before, but then you have to decide in that instance to actually do the thing, right?
Right.
The same way, whenever you're not quitting, you're always constantly deciding to not quit. You're deciding to continue doing what you're doing, even though I think that's often regarded as, and in practice, it can function like a non decision. It's still a choice to
Right.
keep doing whatever you're doing, right? And in poker, what happens is usually it might take a little while to kind of settle in and start playing your best, and then you get warmed up and then you feel like, okay, I'm good. And because specifically poker is a game where you're making constant decisions under time pressure and with imperfect information, your ability to do that at some point will decay, right?
Right.
This is true for everything. This is, if we want to use a non-poker example, it could be you're driving across country
Right.
and you're going to be driving 3,000 miles across some number of days. And each day you have to decide, when is it time to stop and get a hotel room or
Mm-hmm.
park your camper or whatever it is. And if you just decide, you know what, just a little longer, just a little longer, just a little longer, you might end up crashing
Yeah.
because but first metaphorically in terms of your energy level, and then literally in terms of you're not driving well anymore. And in poker, people have a tendency to just play later and later and later, and there are some things that can lead to really poor decisions in this regard. And then there are ways of making better decisions. And so one of the kind of premises of what Tommy Angelo was saying was essentially, if you're better at quitting than your opponents are, in other words, you're better at evaluating when it's time to stop doing the thing that you're doing,
Right.
that's an edge, right? And that's
Yeah.
going to help you. And that's a really important thing to have long term. So I think this is something that applies to all sorts of things. It can apply to working out too, right?
Right.
Like, you're going to do some amount of exercise. At some point, you're going to be overtraining if you just never stop, right?
Yeah.
Something's going to snap. Like, It can be really
I
unhealthy.
currently have I've been trying to exercise more, and one of the best ways I can exercise is going for the wheelchair equivalent of a run, which is
Mhm.
going out and moving my wheelchair, not using
Yeah.
my engine. And I did that for the first time a couple days ago, and pushed myself probably harder than I should, and I've had a sore neck and shoulder ever since. And guess what? It means I can't do it anymore until
Exactly.
this heals.
Exactly. So, there's kind of cold quitting where you're saying, okay, I'm quitting this activity, like say smoking, and I'm
Right.
never going to do it again, or I'm not going to do it for a really long time. And there's the kind of quitting for the day, right?
Right.
Like this particular, and that's kind of more what I had been thinking about talking about,
Hmm.
right? But I think both are important. And I think the word quitting, don't be a quitter or whatever, like I think we both agree that there are instances where quitting is a bad decision and it's not a great thing to do. But then there are plenty of instances where it's like, no, that is the best thing you can do right now is to
Right.
stop doing what you're doing. Even if it's not a inherently harmful activity, it could be an activity that you're doing too long and it's just time to call it a day.
Totally agree there. And I think we're going to do a different episode specifically about sort of the cultural perception of quitting that a lot of us, not Paul, but that a lot of us hold. Paul is just exempt from all society and culture, just as a
Yeah, I
general
opt
thing.
out. I opt
Yeah.
out.
Um, but and how I think it is, and how I think honestly, superhero media is often a big part of that. With the like, you got to keep going. You got to Cap. The great thing about Captain America, he never quits.
I
He
can do this
never.
all day.
Yeah, he can do this all day. And uh, as of getting ready for this, I looked up some definitions of the I don't quit thing. As getting ready for this, I looked up the definition of quitting, and in the Merriam-Webster dictionary, it gives a number of different things, and like especially how the word quit can be used in different grammar terms. It can be like we're going to call it quits, or it can be an adjective or a verb or a transitive or intransitive. But the three that are kind of the biggest ones that really stood out to me is it could be to give up employment specifically. I think that's kind of the most literal definition that we often think of. I quit my job. To cease normal, expected, or necessary action. Which is to kind of just I have done a thing and I'm going to stop doing that thing. And I think Paul's making a really good point that often we think of that specifically in terms of and never do it again, but often it can be just I am quitting for today. I'm quitting for this month. I'm quitting for the rest of the year, whatever it is. And the third definition that Merriam-Webster offers is to admit defeat.
Oh,
And
oh,
you
so,
know,
so
like
editorial.
right?
It's
And,
like,
and I think that's the connotation though that often happens is that it's like, well, because Cap can keep going,
mhm.
can keep doing this all day. How many times have you talked to someone about, a bad situation they're in and the response is like, well, but I'm not a quitter.
Mm.
I've heard that from people talking about bad relationships they're in. I've probably said it about bad relationships I was in. Paul has heard about many of those over the many, many years. But also whether it's, uh, any other kind of like habit that's, uh, becoming problematic for someone or just isn't doing helpful things or, where other people are wanting, I'm speaking kind of generalities because there's so many specifics we can get into on both sides. And I'm not saying like as Paul said, sometimes quitting is not the right thing to do, or sometimes we want to quit for reasons that maybe aren't so great. It's very individual because there are different out of the circumstances. But the language in which we talk about quitting, I think, is so often so negative. And poker especially has really helped me see like that's a dumb way to think of things because whether it's the most literal example of a literal poker hand to the whole night, the casino trip, etc. And like we did an episode of the sunk cost fallacy. That's a lot of this, and this is kind of an outgrowth of that conversation. But I think a larger one of it's helpful to reframe the idea of quitting in terms of what else could you be doing, and is this bringing you joy? Is it bringing you money? Is it bringing you entertainment? Is it bringing you whatever the goal is of the thing? And if it's not, and it doesn't have a hope of doing so in the future, maybe it's time to do something else, or at least do something else for the night.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to remember that everything you spend your time on comes with an opportunity cost of all the other things you're not spending your time on.
Yeah.
right? And, you know, say you're a parent and you want to work hard so that you make money so your kids have things,
Yeah.
right? Things they need and things they want. But all the time you spend working is, for the most part, time you're not spending with your kids.
Yeah.
And so that's a choice. And that doesn't mean that's a bad choice. It just means it's a choice.
Right.
And, you know, when I think back and I'm like, well, if I could have chosen whether my parents worked harder so I had more money growing up, or I could have spent more time with my parents, I'd be like, yeah, I'd take the time for sure,
Right.
you know? But that doesn't mean that that's the right decision. The point is just that it's not, oh, you either do the thing or you don't do the thing.
Right.
It's either you do the thing or you probably do something else.
Right.
And with, you know, to go to the poker example, it's, say you go play at 8 p.m. and maybe your plan is to play until 2 in the morning. And at 2 in the morning, you're playing. And, you know, I'll give two examples of why you might want to keep playing, right? One, the classic example, you're stuck, right? Which is you're down money and you're like, oh, if I just play another hour, I can win it back, right? Maybe you're down $500 in a game where your hourly win rate is maybe $50.
Yeah.
Well, playing another hour is like, you could randomly happen to win a big pot and you could have a winning night, but like you're probably on average going to win about $50. So then you're going to be stuck $450. Like, is that really worth pushing past your time, especially when maybe you're not even feeling your best, in order to try and like not have a loss, right? It's not worth it. It's a terrible, terrible way to think about it. And, you know, and we talked about sunk cost fallacy recently, and how, you know, that's really one of the reasons that people don't quit well, is because of sunk cost fallacy. It's far from the only one.
Well, and I just want to say one more thing about this, because this concept of being behind, I think, is very linked to sunk cost, but can also have other connotations, because just that idea of, you know, I allocated this amount of time and I was supposed to do something. I was supposed to have some result. And I found this, I want to go back to your cross-country driving example.
Yeah.
I've done a lot of cross-country drives, particularly when I was, you know, going back and forth to school, or when my mother's in California and I was in the Midwest, or other things like that. And I'll often have an idea of like, okay, I want to drive till I get to about this point each day.
Right.
And the times when I am feeling like I should push myself beyond when I probably should, because I'm starting to get drowsy or sleepy or whatever, is often when it's, well, I was stuck in traffic for 2 hours, or, you know what, I stopped too long for lunch, and so now I'm behind.
Yeah, you're trying to make up for lost time, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And I hadn't really made that connection until right now, but I think it's the exact same mentality of I'm stuck at the table, because the thing is, you're putting yourself at more and more risk.
Yes.
And obviously there's a risk of crashing or something, but what often happen, I think and that is a real risk, to be very clear, when we're talking about driving.
You can die or kill people.
But what actually happened a lot more frequently, and I think is also a cost you have to think about, is I'd say, okay, I'll just go buy a 5-hour energy. So I'd buy the 5-hour energy in order to drive for 2 more hours. And then guess what? I don't sleep very well that night.
Yeah.
In fact, I sleep real bad. And now the next day, I'm terrible at driving.
Exactly.
And we're just now stuck in a cycle. And I think that's that kind of thinking is just it's because, again, you know, you don't want to quit. You don't want to keep going. And so often you have to think about what's the cost of continuing, you know, and it can be more losing, especially if the game isn't good. It can be, you know, staying in a bad relationship, which is harming you in other ways. Like, so much of the quitting conversation needs to be about what's the actual harm. And is that, if you stick around, how is that going to continue adding up? And is that going to actually make your goal harder to achieve?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's a really nice parallel to the poker example, which in the driving example, I'd say there are good reasons to actually go past how long you had intended, or that can exist, right? One could be you're driving and you look at the weather and you see that tomorrow there's going to be really terrible weather in a particular spot. And you know that you've got great conditions now and you feel good. And you say, okay, it makes sense to push myself more today so that I get ahead of this storm. And then tomorrow I can take a shorter day, and that's fine.
Yeah.
And that's a trade-off, right? But that's there's a positive reason to do that, right? Or maybe it's just like, oh, the conditions were great today, I'm feeling better than average, so
Yeah.
I'm going to just push a little extra. And
If I
then,
get to a big city late at night, I'm often going to push through to avoid
Yeah.
the traffic I'd hit the next morning. Yeah,
exactly. So like that's a reasonable choice. And the poker equivalent is you're playing in a game, you get to a round when you had plans to quit, and just the biggest whale of a whopper comes in and they're playing, and you just know this person's here and they have $3,000 in their pocket and they're going home without it in their pocket.
Yeah.
And someone's going to get that. And so you can, in that spot, make a conscious decision. Okay, maybe I'm going to have that 5-hour energy. Maybe I'm going to have, a green tea matcha latte. This might actually be a real example. And play it till 7 in the morning and just say, all right, tomorrow I'm just going to sleep tomorrow. I'm going to rest.
Yeah.
I'm going to recover. And I'm sacrificing tomorrow's session because I know this is like a magical once a couple times a year type opportunity.
Right.
To have extra profit, right? And I trust myself to be able to sit here and play well for this session, but I know it's going to cost me tomorrow, but that's worthwhile because the value today outweighs that. Right. And so that would be the positive reason to do it. And it still comes at a cost, right?
Right.
But you've decided that cost is worth it because you're not there for some compulsion or some like feeling like, oh, I need to make sure that I win it back or whatever. You're there because like this is a special opportunity and it's worth giving up tomorrow in exchange for converting this opportunity.
And like pulling it back to the superhero conversation, I think the thing with Cap is he's all in on every hand. That's the like he can't just say, you know what, Thanos, I have this rep for like I can keep doing this all day, but I can't. Can we come back tomorrow?
Yeah.
And that's the thing I think that really is so important about the examples you're talking about is that when we frame the heroes we look up to in terms of the ones who never quit, it's because if they quit, absolute disaster happens.
Yeah.
But you can go back to the poker table tomorrow. You can get back on the road tomorrow. You can, we've talked about quitting relationships, but I think often like one of the healthy things I've learned how to do, and it happened because people would do it to me and it would drive me crazy till I realized it was so important, is quit a conversation or quit an argument. Someone will say, look, I think we're both heated right now, or even they'll just say, look, I'm heated right now. I need to stop this conversation and continue it tomorrow. And I'd be like, no, I'm so upset. We definitely have to keep talking.
So hard for me to do, but so healthy.
So
when it's time to do that, it's really important.
Yeah. Or just sleep on it, or just let's both eat or whatever. Like just go take a walk.
Let's take a break.
And I think that's been a hard lesson, but it's that same idea of like quitting it really just comes down to like, what is the consequences of quitting now and maybe stopping forever or quitting now and starting again. And so thinking about that, like, can I come back to the table tomorrow? Can I, have this discussion tomorrow? Can I get back on the road tomorrow? Sometimes you can't.
Right. Yeah.
Sometimes you are trying to get to a certain place to get to your plane, or whatever it is, or, your kids play or whatever it is. You got to keep going. Other times you can make the adjustment. I think that's such an important part of the conversation.
Yeah. And even in those examples you gave, if the conditions are unsafe, you have to sometimes decide, okay, I am going to give up on this because maybe I just missed the play. Instead, I shouldn't get into an accident.
Yeah.
Right.
Making my kid an orphan is not as important as
Exactly. And to touch back on the end game, the Cap in general, but specifically Endgame, I think is interesting because it exemplifies, the most ridiculous, like absurdly outnumbered, no apparent chance at victory.
Right.
Steve Rogers just being like, we're just going to keep going until it's literally impossible. And then at the end of the movie, he's like, all right, I did my thing.
Yeah.
I'm done, and I think some people were like, oh, how can he do that? Whatever. But like, to me, that seemed like a really healthy kind of like, I think it's unreasonable to expect every person who could be a hero to do that for the entirety of their existence.
Yeah.
It's a valid choice to do if they want, but it's also a valid choice to stop at some point. But like when Thanos is trying to, get the Infinity Gauntlet, like, there's no tomorrow.
Right.
If you give up now, right? So I thought that's it's a nice kind of example of both things.
Yeah.
in the
And
same.
and it's funny you said that because I thought of something earlier. Cap quits before that. He quits the Avengers. He gets to a point where he realizes being a part of the Avengers, and he quits S.H.I.E.L.D. Both of those things.
Yeah.
Because he gets to a point where he says, my continued association with these organizations, because I think they've fundamentally changed in some way, or the conditions that they're putting on me are too high, I will no longer be a part of them.
Yeah.
And I imagine a lot of people are like, what are you talking about? He doesn't quit those things. That's absolutely what he does.
Yeah.
Like, he stops being a part of the thing that he's been doing. And in both cases, it's totally justified, but it is him making that decision of, this is no longer where I want to put my energy. I want to do something else.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, it doesn't mean he's going to stop doing hero type stuff, right? I mean, he starts the Secret Avengers, I guess, right, when he leaves the Avengers. But yeah, when he leaves S.H.I.E.L.D., he's like, no.
Yeah.
We're not going to do that.
And at least we know that he's retired now. He's done. So if another global threat like Dr. Doom showed up, we won't see. Oh fuck.
See. I don't even know that doesn't even exist in my head canon. So like, yeah, of course they can't not bring back everybody that they could bring back and make money from bringing back or whatever. And
wait, but Paul, aren't you staying up to date with every bit of news about the MCU?
Totally. Every bit of news with everything, really.
Well, I mean, I'm going somewhere with this, like you used to. What happened?
Right. Yes. Yeah, I quit. I just quit the MCU. It was kind of a soft quit and then a hard quit, right? It was I watched all of the movies and then I watched all of the shows. Some of the shows I loved to an extent. Maybe all of them I was somewhat mixed on, but like there were parts I loved, parts I didn't like. And then I think it was Secret Invasion. I watched the first episode of Secret Invasion. I was like, nope, we're done. We're done here, and I don't know. I don't know. I watched like a little bit of Wolverine versus Deadpool, but and that's not a judgment of anybody else following all of it. Like it lost its. I lost my joy for watching the new Marvel material, and it to me felt like, Star Wars, the same thing happened, right? Where it's like, I really enjoyed the universe. I enjoyed a lot of the individual components, and I'm sure there will be things that come along at some point that I could potentially enjoy and like I can watch, but it just became too much of whatever it was at some point. And I'd like to thank Game of Thrones for being kind of the first show, movie, whatever kind of thing that I just really deliberately quit when I remember watching season 1 and thinking it was mostly pretty cool and enjoying a lot of it. Getting to the end of season 1 and being like, I'm not sure I'm going to love this. And then it's like, whatever, I watched season 2. And somewhere through there, I was just like, I don't think I really like this show anymore.
Yeah.
And I watched a couple episodes of season 3 and I was just like, I can just stop watching it.
Yeah.
And like, that's fine. And I did. And then I watched some of the end, but like, it's kind of the show that taught me like, it's fine to just deliberately quit something that you get maybe some enjoyment out of, but also some like pain and like negative stuff that you don't want. And so I think any of these franchises that go on super long, I mean, I remember when the Batman came out, I was like, oh, they're making another Batman movie. Like, why are they? And then I watched it and I was like, the first 15 minutes I was like, I don't know. And then I was like, wait, I was like, oh no. And we talked about it and whatever, and I was surprised by it. And like, I'm sure some of the MCU stuff and or new Star Wars stuff, like I could watch and like probably be like, oh, this is great, but it's just right now where I am in life, it's not how I want to spend my time. So I don't spend my time that way. I quit doing that.
Well, I think the discussion of quitting media is a really important one, and obviously relevant on this podcast on two levels. First of all, there's sunk cost fallacy all over the place.
Oh, for sure.
Because and again, like I think one of the biggest sources of sunk cost fallacy is there's external shame, and that's something we can talk about as well and have talked about, but also the internal shame and the idea of like, if I watch 5 episodes of something, but I don't finish, if I finish it, then I feel like I've done something, I've accomplished something.
Right.
And at least I can talk to people about it. I know the ending. And when I get 4 or 5 episodes into an 8-episode season, I'm like, I really don't like this. It's hard to make myself stop because then did I just waste all that time
Right.
for all those episodes? And I forget the term, and I'm kind of happy about it because I think it's so awful. But I know, like, among like book reading communities, there's a term for like books you didn't finish and how like you're supposed to finish. And I think part of it is that people are like starting to reaffirm, like, no, it's okay to not finish books. It's okay to not finish short stories. It's okay to open something, from AO3 and get partway into it. Like, this isn't my jam. This isn't doing what I want to.
Yeah.
But it's hard. And I think, but the other part of it is FOMO.
Yeah, there's like a discipline to it.
Yeah, there's just absolutely. And I think the other part of it is, and here's where I think the quitting that you've done that I think has really inspired me, and that I've also done a lot of too, is where it's not just that you're quitting the media itself, is that you're quitting the constant conversation about it.
Yeah.
I'm definitely like, I'm not turning away from it, I think, as often as you are, but I'm not seeking out. Like, I'm not trying to read every article about every trailer and seeking it all out. And I found I just enjoy the media that much more. But when I started doing that, and when I started not watching things, the FOMO of people are talking about, and I like, oh, what do you think of this thing that we saw? And oh, I've got to like be careful on Twitter because I don't want to get spoiled about this thing that everyone's talking about.
Yeah.
And it's I don't want to take it into a whole other tangent, but I think that it is not coincidental that the people who most profit from us watching all the things are often very connected to the social media and the algorithms that push the constant FOMO of how have you not seen this? How are you not in the conversation? By the way, we're going to spoil you all the time, so you should go watch it right now.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's definitely a drive to create that, like, such and such as an event.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I've always thought, like, personally, like, there's some things that I want to see right when they come out because I'm just so excited to see them.
Right.
And sometimes I'm like, that was great, and I'm glad I saw it right away. And sometimes, I'm like, why was I so? That was terrible. Like The Saint or something. I was like, that preview was really good, but the movie was not so good.
Yeah.
But like, and there's a lot of examples. But sometimes it is like, I need to see this soon, otherwise, like, I need to cut myself off from all contact to like anyone else except for the people who know I'm waiting to see this thing and will not say anything about it. Otherwise, yeah, exactly. Which, I mean, I will say,
I raised my hand for those watching us on YouTube.
Matthew has done a marvelous job of not spoiling me on things that I'm like, well, I know that came out in 2003, but I might watch it someday. So if you could just not give any spoilers about it. Like, I don't want Odyssey spoilers.
Yeah. It's, 3,000 years old, but that's fine.
Yeah, but whatever. And like, maybe I read it, but whatever.
And here's one of the odd things, but I think it fits. I think the kind of media quitting that you and I are talking about, and we can say more about baseball, but I want us to get to the merits of quitting in a second.
Yeah.
But in my head, the way I've approached it with you and with others where this is a thing is, I kind of think of it the way I think about people who have quit, something that is thought of as more like traditionally an addiction, like alcohol.
Right.
Yeah. And I don't want this to sound like I'm critiquing you. I think this is something you've self-identified with, but like, I know that I have more of an ability to say, I've mostly quit the Mets. I'm going to read about what happened last night because apparently there's a cool highlight. You have said that if you do that, if sometimes when you do that, you get stuck in a rabbit hole for 3 hours of research that you don't want to do. To me, that's a kind of feeling of like, if I introduce a little of this, you might do a lot more of it than you want to. Yeah. That I don't think you're addicted to news about the Mets, but like, in the same, I approach it the same way of like, hey, this is a thing that you don't want to get yourself too into, so I'm going to be very careful about it. So in the same way that if I'm hanging out with friends who I know don't drink or don't do things like that, I'm going to be careful of like, hey, do you mind if I have a drink? Do you mind if I and reassure them like, I'm not being polite here, like it's totally okay.
Yeah,
I'm about to tell a story about what I was drinking. Is that okay, or do you not want me to do that?
Yeah.
And the same way, I've now gotten to like, hey, Paul, do you mind if I tell you this thing about baseball from last night or whatever?
Yeah. And I'm like, well, I might watch that at some point. So thanks for mentioning it, but I don't want to talk about it yet. Yeah. So I would say, I mean, it would be easy to say like I have an addictive personality, and like that might be accurate, but
Uh-huh.
the way I think of it more is like I'm usually I don't tend to nurture casual interests.
Yeah.
Is pretty much how I'd put it. Where there's not a lot of things that I really enjoy spending my time casually engaging with.
Yeah.
So when I'm going to spend time on something and spend time thinking about it, I usually just want to dive deep on it. Because if it's not something I want to dive deep on, like, well, why not just do something else that I do want to dive deep on?
Right.
You know, and there is I have quit a lot of hobbies very deliberately,
Mhm.
and I don't want to say second guessing because I think it was the right thing at the time, but over the past week or two, I've been noticing that when I basically eliminated almost everything except for like studying poker, teaching poker, playing poker, writing about poker, and I want to have that, you know, okay, it's time to quit doing the thing and to
Mhm.
rest and recover because I've pushed away so many hobby type things. I actually don't have a lot of relaxing activities to do.
Right.
Like maybe I'll watch Murder She Wrote, right? But like and I think that can be not super healthy, you
Yeah.
know, to not have something. So I would enjoy having some more kind of casual hobbies or casual interests, perhaps.
Yeah.
But like to kind of use in a very specific way where I feel like this is my downtime. And to just use baseball as an example, right? Because you brought it up.
Yep.
At the end of last season, I was like, I'm never watching a baseball game again.
Yeah.
And that was what we call rage quitting, right?
Which is an important thing.
Because it was just a disastrous like end of the season for
Yep.
our beloved Mets. And I was just like, why would I ever want to go through this again? Right. And then like I just found then we were talking about it some. My mom and I were talking about it some. You're the two that I really talk about baseball with now that one of my neighbors has moved, who is like, it was a very nice casual kind of thing to talk about, right? But so then we talked about it a little bit, and I was like, okay, there's this move made that, and like off-season baseball is really interesting. There's like so much maneuvering and so many things you can do to rebuild a roster, and like the Mets did like some really unusual stuff, basically, is what I would say, right? And the jury was very split. The results have not been so split. The results have been very bad. Of course, as a poker player who thinks a lot about variance, it's impossible for me to look at this without framing it within the, well, here were the projections. Here's what I thought was going to happen. Some other people thought that the actual outcome was much more likely than I thought it was. But the fact that it's what happened, I don't think means that's the most likely outcome. It's just what happened.
Right.
Kind of like if somebody's like, oh, if you go play poker, you're probably going to lose. And then you go poker and you lose. That doesn't necessarily mean they were right, right?
If I can put that just in, and I think we're going to do a full episode on variance, especially as we get closer to the elections, because the way people misunderstand this, I think, is a cause of a lot of social problems, to be very 100%. Clear. But it's if I tell you, I think this is a very good bet because I think it has an 80% chance of winning. And then it loses.
Yeah.
A lot of people look at it and go, you were wrong to think it has an 80% chance of winning.
Right.
There is no data point that has entered the conversation that should in any way challenge the fact that I had thought it was an 80%. Now, is it possible that the fact that it was in that 20% of possibilities is a good reason to take a look and say, well, let's re-examine if I was correct to think it was an 80% chance?
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah.
If it happens twice in a row, does that mean I was wrong about the 80%? No. But is it a good reason to maybe look harder? Yeah. If it doesn't happen 100 times in a row, you know, then absolutely, I was probably wrong to think it was happening 80% right.
Yeah, you're probably not going to get a 1 in 5. That would be 5 to the 100th power, I believe.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, reality is going to be somewhere in the middle, but I think that's that whole point of, because like, and I'll be honest, like, and we're not going to get into this debate, but just kind of framing the conversation on both sides, I definitely think that the moves that the Mets made had a much higher chance of failure than you did.
Yeah, for sure.
But I think and there's a part of me that misses you in baseball for a lot of reasons, but in part because I want to re-examine those conversations.
Yeah.
But in part because of what I've learned about variance, in large part from you, but also through my own studies, there's no part of me that's going to say, okay, the fact that this was in the range of possibility, even if everything that the Mets leadership thought was right is correct. You know?
Exactly.
And I think that's we're getting off the topic of quitting, so we'll pull back to that. But I think that's also it's a very important thing, you know. And I think that's the like. Do I think Tony Stark was right to try and create Ultron? No. Do I think that the Ultron becoming what it became, like, that's actually a much more complex example.
Well, was he right to create Vision?
Well, because it's the like the point is that like taking a risk with some part of your stake is acceptable because you can afford to keep doing it again and again. If Ultron destroys the world, then congratulations, Tony Stark just went literally all in for everybody. And you probably shouldn't do that if it's not 100%, unless there's other bad possibilities.
Yeah, well, I mean, you'd have to estimate how likely it is that some sort of alien invasion was going to do the same, and then how likely your thing was to counteract that. And it's a very complicated EV.
I mean, at the end of the day, part of the point of all these conversations is also that poker provides a very good model, but that poker has some degree of perfect information in a way that most real life decisions absolutely don't.
Okay. Wait. What do you mean?
What I mean is that in poker, I can mathematically calculate what are the odds of me winning this pot, and what are the mathematical implications of this particular bet and this particular pot size in a way that I can't. I have a lot more information about what's the likelihood of my losing this pot than Tony Stark does of an alien invasion, or that a person does of their perfect information long term.
Yeah. Because it's very concretely a game of imperfect information. What can I try and say what I think you're trying to say in a way that that I think I'll agree with? Poker is a very concrete game. You know what cards are in the deck most of the time, unless something's gone weird. You can calculate, given certain assumptions, what kind of the range of possibilities are and what the average outcome of that, the expected value of that is. In larger non-poker kind of life situations, many of those things are very difficult to quantify / unquantifiable, right? Like, I mean, you know, are you going to quantify the value of each life? Like, people do.
Yeah.
I don't accept those numbers, you know? And so I would say poker is a very contained game. And as a result, because there are rules within a very clear field of play, there are ways that you can calculate things based on assumptions. Having said that, like, you have to be making assumptions in order to make those calculations.
Right.
And as a result, you know, and you're operating under imperfect information about, you know, what cards are out against you and the strategies people will employ. So I think I see what you mean overall, right?
Let me try and rephrase it.
Yeah.
Poker is a good model for understanding how variance works. It also, though, is a model that cannot be one-to-one applied to real-life situations, because in poker, there is often a limited number, that some of the variables are inherently limited. The cards in the deck, the amount of money in front of you, the amount of money in the pot, not only limited, are specifically definable in a way that they aren't when you talk about the variance of, will a relationship or a job get better? Or will traffic be there, you know?
Yeah. Like, you don't even know how many suits there are. In the poker game of life, basically, right? Like, you don't know what the actual elements of the deck are all the time, and
like there's
another level of uncertainty.
Any kind of thing that tries to predict human activity, like, we're never, you know, obviously a lot of the variance conversation comes out of, you know, situations where models would predict one election result, another election result would happen. And you'd quit, and especially when models say, like, there's an 85% chance this candidate will win, like, and then the other candidate wins. Some people want to say, well, the 85% was true, was was definitely garbage.
Right.
That may be the case, but it's not proven by that one data point.
No. Yeah.
But the point is that we are never going to actually be able to say there was this was the right percentage.
Correct.
And ask in a way that I can say, oh, I have 4 spades. There's 1 card to come. There are, there are 4 suits in the deck, so I have a 1 in 4 chance that the next card will be a spade.
Right.
That is factually incorrect. I know that certain spades are dead because I have 4 of them, one place or another.
Yeah.
And that's all I mean, in a way that like that level of factual analysis of poker odds is possible.
Yes.
Same with blackjack, same with other things, in a way that it's not.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a lot easier to say something's definitely wrong in poker than in most of life, where you're just like, well, was it a 15% chance that one person won? Or was it a 50% chance? Or 100% chance? Or a 1% chance? We don't know. And there were models in, say, a random election, I don't know, 2016, when certain models were like 99%, 99 point something, 98.5.
Right.
And most of the models were that. And then another model was like 60 something.
Right.
And then the underdog won, and people were like, oh, the 60 something was too optimistic. It's like, wait, there were other ones that were 99. What are we doing here? But yeah, there's no way to really falsify. Not in the same way as there is to be like, no, there were actually no spades left in the deck, and so you couldn't get there because you're playing 7-card stud and all the spades were dead. Yeah, no, for sure. I want to go back to the baseball thing just briefly, where so I decided to watch baseball this year, right? And I ended up watching most of the games early on. They didn't go very well. Maybe not most of the games. I didn't watch a lot of the losses, and unfortunately, those were most of the games. But it ended up, and I would listen to podcasts, and like when I pay attention to baseball, I look up stats. I look at like trying to assess, look at projections and try and actually kind of see how likely certain outcomes are.
Yeah.
And then you and I would talk about it a lot. My mom and I would talk about it a lot. And I enjoyed those conversations,
Yeah.
But it got to a point where I was like, okay, well, I can't listen to the podcast anymore because I just think these people are like out of their mind, some of them. And then with you and my mom, it was more just like, there's things we disagree on. And it's like, we've discussed that to the point of we've all, we've expressed our opinions.
Right.
And listened to the other and either agreed or not agreed.
Yeah.
But where there's not really a volume, like there's a volume of information, but it's not necessarily new information that, it wasn't moving the needle for me.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, there's not that much more to talk about for me. Like, and so I don't have anything new to express. And then on top of that, I was like, watching the games actually doesn't seem fun anymore. But more importantly, I was realizing like, this is taking a lot of time, And if I felt like I have a bunch of hours that I need to fill and I want to find something to fill those hours, that's great. But because there were very concrete things I was trying to do with my time, and I found I was failing to do that.
Right.
I was left with basically making a choice between being able to have enjoyable conversations with people I want to have conversations with about this specific topic, and sinking a bunch of other time into the actual watching and kind of like data gathering or whatever thing, or put that time into the work that I know I need to be doing in order to get where I want to get in the next couple of years, and maybe just find some other things to talk about. Because it's not like, and it would have been a harder choice if like the only thing I connected with my mom on was like baseball, or the only thing you and I could talk about was baseball, but like, that's just not the case. Like we have tons of common interests. So it's just like finding a way to be like, okay, I'm going to just cut that out for now, indefinitely. And then say, okay, we're going to have other things that we can chat about and have meaningful conversations. And maybe I'll come back and like kind of look at it again when I feel like, I've established can I be a casual baseball observer? And like, I feel like now, because, the whole trade deadline passed and a bunch of things passed, I'm like, okay, I can watch a half inning here and there. Yeah, that's fine. And we can talk about it.
And it's been funny because like going a little further on the Mets example, like the team has gotten significantly better or
Mhm.
is playing significantly better in a relatively short amount of time
Yeah.
since the trade deadline.
Mhm.
Variance is variance. There's a lot of reasons why that could happen. It could not. It's possible that it's not significant. It is also possible, though, that like the trade deadline being such a clear sign of like the Mets are not trying to win this year.
Yeah.
They're just trying to like test out the new players. There's a lot less pressure on those players,
Yeah.
and they're having fun, and it makes it fun to watch again. And people are coming in some sports conversations being like, hey, isn't it great watching them? There's no pressure. We're just seeing what they can do. And others are like, well, actually, if they continue at this pace and like these 6 other teams lose at this pace,
Yeah.
they might get back into the playoffs. And I'm like annoyed at that. And like,
Right.
I'm kind of like, look, if we backdoor our way into being in the playoff hunt somehow, I'll pay attention to that. And I am like casually checking the wild card standings every couple of days.
Yeah.
But I mostly don't care. I'm just enjoying it for what it is.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a further part of this conversation that, like, when we quit something, I think there's often a lot of feelings about, like, how does it affect other people around us, you know? And, like, you're one of the people I think of as least affected by those kind of social pressures. But, yeah, you're like, I like talking about baseball. When you quit baseball, it sucks.
Right.
Like, that shouldn't affect it, but I think that's a thing. And
Well,
but it's been a good lesson for me of like, okay, so I need to reframe that. Like, you know, and I've been I've been looking at other ways that I can scratch my I want to talk about baseball itch.
Yeah.
And in a weird way, fandom actually was a great example of that, because you and I have been talking about Star Wars. Star Wars, I think, was one of the first things you and I really bonded over, besides being the only 2 sober people in a room where everyone else was passed out, with whatever intoxicants we were both in high school.
Playing guitar while everybody's like passing.
Yeah, exactly. But we've always loved Star Wars. And then we kind of got to The Last Jedi and hit this impasse, because you and I saw that such fundamentally. And then we got to The Last Jedi, which was this impasse because you and I saw that in such fundamentally different ways. And I'm sure both of us had some level of like, how can the other person think of this? Because we, and we had a couple of good conversations, I think, that were at first probably a little bit more, especially I think more from my side, trying to convince you that you were wrong. And I think some degree of that the other way, probably more from my side. I had some degree of like, an awful lot of people are saying things that sound like what you're saying for terrible reasons. I don't think you're saying it like that. I kind of just wanted to make sure, you weren't on that train, and you clearly weren't. And I think then we got to a point of, let's cautiously try to understand the other. And there's some value to that. I've basically had a better understanding of the movie because of understanding you. And I think you've had the same with me. And then we kind of just stopped talking about it.
Yeah.
And we're able to be like, look, but there's a lot of other cool Star Wars stuff to talk about. And that was a good way to move on.
Yeah.
I think that's another part of the quitting thing is so often when we're thinking about, do we quit this thing or not? It really is just that. It's the like, do I do this or do I not do this?
Mm-hmm.
And it is so important to think about, like, every moment you are doing a thing, you are not doing 8 million other things.
Right.
And so that means there's a cost of continuing to do it, and there's a cost of quitting, but also that it is so helpful. Like, I have not picked up a guitar in a long time. I never made a conscious decision to quit playing guitar. It has happened gradually over time. But for all intents and purposes, I've quit playing guitar because I've been focusing my time on so many other things.
Yeah.
I recently picked up a guitar again, and I felt a sense of loss because I was not as good as I used to be. And so part of me was like, no, I got to play guitar 5 hours a week again, whatever.
Yeah. Pro tip, don't.
Yeah, no, I don't have the time to do that.
No, that's not even the reason, but yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I'll get into this in a moment.
Yeah. But it just, I kind of wandered on to different parts of the topic, but like, I think when we think about that of like, when people in our lives quit things that are how we see them socially, if you're spending most of your time at a bar and a friend of yours realizes they have a problem with drinking, often there's a part of you that wants to be like, no, this is an extreme example, but I think most people probably won't be at this level. But like, you wind up socially, like, often not wanting someone to accept that they're an alcoholic or whatever, because you want to keep seeing them at the bar and you don't want to stop drinking, and you don't want to think, and this does not mean that everyone who goes to a bar to socialize has a problem drinking by any means. but it might be you don't want to question that. Like there's just when someone else in your life quits something that you don't feel you need to quit, it can raise really hard discussions. And I'm not saying it means you have to quit, but I think it can mean you're forced to question it in a way that you don't want to.
Yeah, I think that's a real thing for sure. There's also the like, I mean, you alluded to like somebody doesn't want their drinking buddy to quit drinking because then they lose their drinking buddy.
Yeah.
Right? They're like not going to be their drinking buddy anymore. Like, and then some people quit drinking and they can hang out around people drinking. Some people are recovering alcoholics who can occasionally have a drink, and a lot are not.
Yeah.
Right? Like some people can go from drinking too much to being a casual drinker, and some people are like, I need to not even talk about alcohol. And like that's fine. What's important is that you figure out which one you are out of all of them, right? And which could also be the person who drinks moderately and is fine. Like I don't know, right? But yeah, that kind of sort of yeah.
And this actually ties back to something else I was going to bring up earlier, that a part of the quitting conversation, and especially when you're talking to others about it, is I think it's very easy if you think that you don't have to quit. It's very easy to find it hard to believe that others have to quit.
Right. Yeah.
And this goes back to baseball.
Yeah.
I am able to watch a baseball game, be really upset about it, and then 5 minutes later, I'm fine.
Right.
And there's corollaries. There are things that I have had to quit that you've never had a problem with, you know. But I remember, like, when you talked about, like, oh my God, like it just ruins my day when I watch a game and they lose. I don't want to do this to myself. There's a part of me that's like, that's dumb. Just don't feel that bad. Like, you know,
just don't feel that way.
You know, or just read a box score and don't go into 20 minutes of analysis of the things.
Yeah.
But that's not how you analyze. And it was really helpful for me to be able to make that connection in the same way of, like, you know, the things that I get really obsessive over that people are like, why are you doing that? You know, it's just because I am, because that's how my brain is wired. And so I need to not do 0.1 because I can't stop myself from doing 0.6. If you're able to, that's great. But, you know.
Yeah. And it's not always because, like, I can't stop myself from doing it, right? It can just be like, well, if, you know, and it's not necessarily like every loss, right? But it's just like in general, it's like, and like certain types and whatever, but just like basically looking at something and just being like, is this a positive experience for me anymore? You know?
Yeah.
And if it's not, why am I still doing it? And sometimes it's like, well, it's a mix of positive and negative, and then weighing them out, right? And like now, like, yeah, I feel like I could look at a box score. I could watch a random game. I watched an inning here and there over the week. I was somewhere that had TV. I was like, okay, I'll watch it on. I'll turn it on. I'll watch an inning. And I was like, okay. And I turned it off and I watched the rest of the game. And it wasn't like, it was just like, yeah, this was a nice way to spend 5-10 minutes, you know, and then I'll go watch Jeopardy. But like, you know, there is a truth that, like, quitting something does affect others, right? The people that you shared that thing with, sometimes it affects others positively, sometimes it affects them negatively. You know, in terms of quitting baseball, like, I did give actual consideration, you know, like, is this, like, I knew that there was a negative effect that would have on you and my mom, just in terms of, like, being able to talk to someone you wanted to talk to about it. And then I was like, well, does that outweigh, like, what I need to not do?
Right.
And I was like, no. And, like, will you be okay? Yes, you'll both be fine. Right. So, like, that's what I have to do.
And quick tip, it's because we care about you and we don't want you to do things that are bad for us.
Exactly.
And if you have people in your life who are like, no, keep doing this bad thing because it benefits me.
Yeah.
You might want to quit that person in your life.
Yeah, you might, but also sometimes you might I mean, generally I agree with you, right?
Yeah. There are obviously.
There are times when somebody's in, like, a very vulnerable spot, and it's just like, okay, I will spend my time in ways that aren't my favorite way of spending my time because I feel like that's what you need right now. Not just like something you want in this kind of, like, whatever kind of way, but it's just like, okay, this is just important. And then that becomes an important way to spend time, that the benefits are not just like the thing. It's, you know, the consequences of the thing.
At a couple of nights ago, I had to get up in the morning with my baby, and I really didn't want to be on the phone with a friend. My friend was in a really bad state. And so I didn't quit.
You just got to do it. Yeah. Exactly.
I am alive today because Paul took some time out of their life to deal with stuff when I was going through some real hard times. And so, yeah, that can be true on a minor and it can be true on a macro level. And I mean, and honestly, like having a baby has been such an interesting experience to me in reevaluating the quitting conversation because it has literally changed the table stakes of every discussion I make. You were talking before about like, can I stay up all night at this poker game even if it'll wreck my tomorrow? You know, do I have a sick day at a job? Or can I call in sick?
Right.
That might have a deleterious effect on my job, but not disastrous.
Yeah.
Can I tell my partner, I know you really wanted to go to that museum with me tomorrow. I'm not going to be able to because I stayed up late at a poker game. That's probably not going to lead to a comfortable conversation with your partner.
Right.
It might lead to one of those, we need to take a walk and talk about this more tomorrow.
Yeah.
Or it might be something your partner knows about you and is fine with. Either way. But I can't have that conversation with my baby. No. You know? Like, and literally last night, Mary and I were playing a video game that we were really enjoying and we really wanted to keep playing. And I joked to her, I wish I could call a sick day on being a parent because I really want to stay up all late. But
you just can't.
Yeah, you can't. It's a different kind of table stakes. Yeah. And it's a weird way, but thinking about it in terms of that kind of quitting, it was a really helpful way to frame it for me.
Yeah, nice. I like that. And I'm glad that you did ultimately quit, even if, you know, it wasn't. Can you pause? Is it possible, or is it like one of these?
Yeah, no, I could pause. And it's funny, I was going to mention this video game as another example of what you're talking about. It's called Fire Emblem Three Houses. It's a game on the Switch. It's a really fun game. And it's a turn-by-turn strategy game, like an RPG. Okay. And it's one of my favorites because it's I mean, you would absolutely hate it. It's a bunch of kids that are like fighting at a high school where they're being trained for war. And so half your decisions are about what kind of fighting do you learn and how do you fight in the war. And half the conversations are about like which character asks out which character to go to the dance.
Amazing. Like they just made this game for you.
Yeah, it's so much what I love. But the thing is, I'm playing this game. Right now, I'm playing an awful lot of poker online, which used to be a game for me. It used to be a form of entertainment. I'm now shifting into trying to make it a serious pursuit that will eventually become money generating for me. Right now, it's mostly money neutral. That means I have to take it a lot more seriously. That means it's not fun and entertaining in the same way.
Yeah.
So I play Fire Emblem. The thing is, in Fire Emblem, there's a lot of information that you don't have that if you knew the information, it would make it the game, you would do better at the game.
Yeah.
And so I Googled, hey, which of these three characters is considered actually the strongest one to turn into an archer versus to turn into a barbarian?
Yeah.
And then I read about that. And then I read more about it. And then I read more about it. And then it was the point when I was tempted to pull out my computer and make an Excel chart or a Google Sheets chart, which I've done before with this game. I'm like, okay, I want this character to be good at archery and I want this character to be good at riding. So let me make sure that this character gets every chance they can to do archery. That I was like, you know what? This is not good. I am trying to min-max this activity in a way that many people do find fun. I'm not saying
no, I find that fun sometimes, for sure.
Yeah. And there was a time at which I did find it fun.
Yeah.
But at a time when I'm literally trying to min-max my poker, and this is supposed to be an escape from that, guess what? That won't make it fun. And so I had to ask myself, I had to ask myself, will I still have fun playing this game if I'm not min-maxing?
Right.
And if I wasn't, I had to stop playing the game. Turns out I can for now.
Nice.
But if it gets to a point where I can't, then I'll have to re-examine it.
Yeah, very good. Very good. I wrote a chapter in Way of the Poker Warrior, my first book, called The Cost of Making It Your Job, which was about first, taking Taekwondo and just making it my job. It was my very fun hobby, whatever. Like it was a pursuit of skill, right? It was something I'd spent tons of time doing, but I wasn't getting paid. I didn't have to. Any given day I could be like, I'm just not going to go. And that was fine. I did go almost every day, but I had that choice. And then when I made it my job, it was like, okay, well, this isn't for fun anymore. It still is fun, but not always. And when it's not fun, I can't just say, I'll quit for the day. It's like, no, I've got to quit if I want to just tap out, more than occasionally and get someone to run something.
And in a world right now where the internet is both allowing but also encouraging and in good and bad ways, like I know there's a lot of ways right now on the internet to make your hobby profitable.
Yeah.
And that's everything from sex work to Etsy designing to, people who sew and and I know people from all of those different works who have talked about, like, I used to love taking sexy pictures of myself and posting them to groups and getting that information. I used to love making jars of jam at home. I used to love making sweaters. And then I realized I could do that thing for money, and that's good. But to some extent, I don't love it anymore.
Right.
And some people, it's like, yeah, but it's still making me money and I still can find ways to love it. And if he can, that's great. Others, like, I want to try weird kinds of jam, and that's not going to sell as well as just making the same strawberry jam over and over and over again. But I need to do that to make money. I should stop trying to make money this way because it's no longer fun for me. Like,
Yeah, and it's definitely right. I mean, as you said, it's not a necessary consequence of making it your job, of making it, especially if it's a side hustle. Like, you really can just, like, you say you're a writer and you say, okay, I'm going to put some books out there. Like, you just can do that, and then they can make whatever money they make or make nothing. And, like, that's fine if you're not investing a bunch of money in it. This is like, you can min-max it or you cannot min-max it.
Yeah.
Right. But I will say, like, it's very hard to maintain the same joy and the same kind of casualness when you do see, money coming in, and you're like, well, do I really want to make less money, or do I want to make less fun? And then obviously in poker, that knows what the rest of the chapter was about.
Mm-hmm. So we're about an hour into this conversation and haven't got to the main thing you wanted to talk about, which is the merits of quitting. Although we've talked about it, I think we talked a lot about it, just not in the framework you wanted to necessarily. Do we want to save that for another conversation, or actually would you say we have talked about most of the things you wanted to talk about? We just didn't do it as an organized way.
Yeah, I feel like we did. I feel like the point being, like, really just to kind of summarize.
Yeah.
Really, I would say, quitting is just making a choice between two things where maybe society would make you think that one is a more significant choice than the other. And it's true that quitting will upset the status quo of your life, of whatever's going on, right? It will cause change. In some cases, it may prevent negative change if you have, like, an addiction that's really hurting you. But it's really, the way I'd frame it is it's simply consistently reassessing your choice to do something and evaluating, is this a good thing to keep doing? You know, and I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be a daily thing, but it should be, it's periodic. Like anything you're doing, if you're doing it without really thinking about it, then you're making the unconscious choice to continue. And you can either make, whenever you evaluate whether or not to quit, you can make the conscious choice to quit, or you can make the conscious choice to continue, which I think often leads to a lot more fulfillment than just unconsciously choosing to continue. If that makes sense, right? It's like, it's affirming, right? It's like, no, I'm choosing to spend my time on this. I'm choosing to keep doing this thing that, there's some negative consequences and there's some positives, and I'm choosing that. And I think that can be empowering.
Yeah, I think that's really true. And part of that is the recognition of you can't do everything,
Exactly.
And like, so not to get into a very different conversation, but I'll just drop this briefly. I'm a big adherent of what's called process philosophy, and it leads to a theology called process theology. I got him Alfred North Whitehead. I think he's like Alfred, something like that. Whitehead wrote a lot about this. A lot of others did, but it's basically the idea of, like, it's kind of like quantum philosophy. It's like this idea of looking at that every moment that something is happening, like, everything else is not happening. Like that every time you're saying yes to one thing, there's an extent to which you are saying no to every single other thing. And, like, you can get very esoteric with that, but, like, if you decide to become monogamous with someone, which is a perfectly reasonable discussion, or just to have some level of commitment to someone, you are saying no to every other person. Every time you choose to go to a movie, you are saying, no, I don't want to go to every other movie. Now, it sounds weird to say it, but I think it's actually a really helpful way of conceiving it, because then it's like, yeah, I did quit guitar because I wanted to do these other things. I did quit watching sports as much as I wanted to because I wanted to watch other things. And, like, that to me is a really helpful framework of thinking of these things, of it's okay to quit because we are actually quitting all the time.
Yeah.
We just, we frame it in ways of when something is like thought of as quitting and when something is not. And there's reasons for that, but I think re-examining it from that lens just becomes really helpful, both in terms of analyzing yourself, but also in terms of analyzing all the stuff around you. You know, how often, I think with our heroes, with our politicians, I can see lots of examples of where, you know, people aren't willing to quit. Iron Man wasn't willing to quit, and that became a real problem. There are wars that we've gotten into that we've stayed in for far longer than we should have, both right now and in the past, because people didn't want to be seen as quitters. And that's really dumb.
Yeah.
But also, every time a politician realizes they had a dumb idea and they change it, people call them like, why don't you have the strength of your convictions? No, because they learned new things.
Yeah.
You know?
You should change your mind. You should be allowed to change your mind.
Yeah.
That's different from like making a campaign promise and then just like doing something completely different, like because you're just, you know, conning people. But
well, but like George H. Walker Bush, the senior Bush, a big reason why Clinton won the election is because he promised he wouldn't raise taxes, and then he did.
Yeah.
The thing is, he made that promise under a set of economic conditions that people were predicting wouldn't change.
Right.
That was a dumb prediction. But the reason he raised taxes is because the economic situation fundamentally changed. He said, look, I have new knowledge. I probably should have made that promise. But also, you know, and like...
Right. No, but what I'm saying is that's not making a campaign promise that you never intend on following.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
that's making a campaign promise and being like, oh, crap.
Right.
You know, like no new wars and then like aliens invading. You're like, except this one.
Yeah.
You know.
Exactly.
Yeah. And to your point, the word decision comes from the same root as like homicide and like suicide and like matricide and fratricide. Anyway, infanticide. I could go on.
Is the idea that you're killing the other option?
Yeah, you're cutting off the other possibility, right? And so you're essentially eliminating that other option by choosing the one option. So
yeah. I could decide to keep this conversation going, but my blood sugar is plunging.
Yeah.
And so I am going to have a very bad experience if we keep talking. So I'm going to cut off this conversation. So Paul, why don't you quickly tell people where they can find more of your thoughts, including that essay you just mentioned. I will simply say that Superhero Ethics is awesome. So is Star Wars Generations. So is Marvel Movie Minute. You should check out all those things.
So you can find my stuff on zenmadman.com. You can use the code SHE400 or links in the show notes to get any of the books I have there, which includes Way of the Poker Warrior, Zen Madman's Friday Night is My Monday Morning, Volume 1, and some fiction I've written. And the only other thing I'd like to add is on the guitar note, and I'll keep it short. And I wrote about this a little bit in my thing. I stopped playing guitar for a long time. I started again, and I decided to start again by trying to learn an incredibly difficult solo, Tornado of Souls, that has a lot of like bending, and I'm doing it on like 12-gauge strings, which are very heavy. And I did it so much that I now have trigger finger in my left hand, and that ring finger doesn't really bend properly anymore, or not comfortably. And so I advise you, if and when you decide to pick up the guitar again, go slow. Yeah,
good point. Or if you want to start exercising again because you feel bad, because there's an opportunity cost on exercising, start slow because my shoulder hurts. So yeah, all right. Speaking of which, there are a lot of great back episodes. Listen to a couple. Don't listen to 24 at a time because that's 24 hours you need sleep.
Sure, but you could just put it on play and just like have it play them all out, and you just like hear it.
I'm cutting the session off. We're Superhero Ethics. May the force be with you.
Use the 4s.